Hey everyone, welcome to UK Media Warrior and the final episode of this season of Doctor Who. Season 10, episode 12, The Doctor Falls. Okay, this episode I was in two minds about. I've watched it through 3 times now, and there are parts of it, quite a few parts of it, that I really enjoyed. And as per normal for this season, there are parts of it, quite a few parts of it, I didn't enjoy. So what we're going to do in this one is 50-50 it up. There will be quite a long list of things I found wrong with this. Now, as per all my other reviews, I don't apologise for the fact I find things wrong with television shows or films or whatever. The business of these people are to write shows that are enjoyable for us to watch, that are solid writing, good characterizations, and basically a solid all-round. Okay, that's their job. That's what they get paid the big bucks for. Okay, we should be able to watch a show on TV or a film in the cinema and not really be able to pick any holes in it whatsoever. I mean, okay, there's always going to be a bit of, a give and take here and there. I mean, that's understandable for any film, especially obviously fantasy films or sci-fi films or anything like that. You expect it, so that's fine. And Doctor Who is obviously a sci-fi show, but if a series as long-running as Doctor Who has established laws, has established law, has established canon, and they are sticking to that supposedly, then the writers of these shows have no excuse for not doing so, or for giving us sloppy and weak writing. So I don't apologise for listing the things I find wrong with episodes. Equally, why would I apologise for finding things I like about episodes? So that out of the way, let's get started with the good points. Now, all of the good points are going to be centred around the Doctor, Missy and the Master. Because those three actors, Peter Capaldi, Michelle Gomez and John Sims, outshone everybody else in the last episode, and most certainly in this episode. Whenever they're on screen together, whenever the three of them are talking, they outact everybody else in the episode. Other than on occasion, Nardole. Now, oddly, the character of Nardole, when I first saw him at the beginning of the series, I was like, I'm going to hate this guy. I don't like the actor who plays him personally. The characters he has played before on TV have always annoyed me. So when I saw that he had been cast as Nardole, I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible. So I went in with that mindset for his character, but I very quickly got turned around. I love Nardole. He has been acted fantastically. He adds weight to situations. He brings a humanity that sometimes is missing even from the companions like Bill or the Doctor. So, and his scenes in this episode were amazing. His goodbye scene to the Doctor and Bill was heart-wrenching. It really was, and it was so well acted. It was phenomenal. So, okay, so he is on par with the Doctor, Missy and the Master, but the scenes with Missy and the Master together talking, the scenes with the Doctor, Missy and the Master all discussing, and how the Doctor was monologuing, how his fights aren't just to win, they're not for personal glory, they're just to be kind, they're just to do the right thing. That monologue he gives to the Master, and then for the Master to just turn around and say, you see his face? Yeah, this is the face of somebody who hasn't been listening to a thing you've said. And he just smiles and walks off. I mean, John Sims has nailed this character perfectly. And Michelle Gomez as Missy even more so. She has provided layers to the character, the overall character of the Master, that John Sims hasn't had to do before. Because she has had to keep us on the hook all the way through this season. Is she good? Is she bad? Is she playing the Doctor? We didn't really know either way up until this episode, where we find out that really the Doctor succeeded. He has turned her good. She wants to be a good person. She wants to go back and stand with the Doctor in his fight against the Cybermen, even if that means her death. So that was great. I wanted her to take that route. I wanted them to write Missy to end up being good. So I was really overjoyed with that. And then seconds later, the Master shoots her dead, supposedly. Now, from what I hear, Michelle Gomez is done with Doctor Who and she's not coming back. If that's the case, then it's a huge shame, because she is amazing, and I loved her as Missy, and I wanted that character to come back to continue, because her interactions with Peter Capaldi as the Doctor were fantastic. Now, Peter Capaldi is obviously leaving now at the end of this season, so Missy would have to come back and interact with a new Doctor, but Michelle Gomez is such a fantastic actor, I don't think that would be a reason to worry. So I was a bit upset when they've sort of written her out by having the Master literally shoot himself, commit suicide, for want of a better way of looking at it. Now, we always knew the Master was a little bit psychotic, but to kill himself just to stop himself from going and helping the Doctor, I don't know if he would do that. I mean, that's a level of psychosis that even the Master has never really reached before. He's always been about himself. His goals to be in power, to have control over everything has been about him, his own glory, his own well-being. For him to shoot himself and prevent himself from regenerating simply to stop him going good, I'm having a hard time pushing him to get that far, to go that far. But anyway, another thing is, although John Sims is fantastic in this episode and he portrays the Master with such amazing tenacity and glee, the Master, it didn't have to be the Master. You could have taken the Master out of this episode and out of the previous episode, put in another character, and it would have worked just as well. You have to keep Missy in it because we have to find out if she's good or not, and we have to find out the end of her journey. But the male Master, John Sims' Master, he didn't honestly have a lot to do. He could have quite easily been taken out, cut him out of the episode, not have him there at all in any shape or form, not even have a character in there like that, and it would have still worked out just as well. So I suppose Moffat decided having the two Masters and the Doctor in an episode would have been good, and I agree, it would have been fantastic. But I think another episode would have been better, because there was so much going on in this episode. We didn't have the time to really deal with that ensemble cast, those three, the Doctor, the Missy and the Master. I think it suffered because of that. But I said, all my good points are, whenever they were on screen, I was happy because they outacted everyone around them. Now, it sounds like that's not much of a good point. That's a very short list of good points. But when you rewatch the show, the amount of time you see the Doctor, Missy and Master together or interacting or whatever, there's quite a lot of it on there. So it's about half of the show at least, or a good third of the show would have those characters in there. So although that's my one good point, it covers quite a large variety, quite a large length of the show. Okay, so let's have a look at some of my bad points. Now, this is quite a long list, so I have to apologise, I suppose, for that. But as I said previously, no, I'm not going to apologise for it. If I found problems with this, then it's weak storytelling, it's weak writing. So, first of all, why did they have to move it to this solar farm with these kids on a farm? I thought they were going to deal with the problem that was on the lower decks, with that deck that was being destroyed by pollution, and save the humans that were down there. Instead, they basically say, well, nah, we're not going to bother with them, to hell with them, let them become Cybermen. We're going to move it up to this nice green country farm and have it there. So it ends up being like an old Western film where you've got the settlers in their cabin holding out against the Indians who are attacking. It's sort of like a little bit like that. So that was a little bit annoying because I wanted them to sort out the problem from the previous episode. The start of the episode I enjoyed, where the Master and Missy have got the Doctor on the rooftop and they're talking to him and they're explaining things. So that was cool, but then things start to go a little bit out of whack. So let's have a look. Okay, so I'm going to list the points that I have found wrong in this episode. Okay. Number 1. Bill as the Cyberman holding on to the shuttle. Okay. She hasn't got magnetic boots. She's not holding on to the building in any shape or form. She's just standing there on the roof holding a very flimsy looking ladder, floppy ladder, wire ladder that's hanging down from the shuttle. And because of that, she's managing to stop the shuttle from taking off. That's not possible. The shuttle will just lift her off of the roof. Okay, we've seen that done in hundreds of thousands of other TV shows and films, so we know that. So for them to just, oh no, Bill just standing there holding it, that's enough. That's all we have to explain. That's fine. No, that wouldn't work. Number 2, the Doctor's description that Cybermen will always turn up because of parallel evolution and humanity will always do this to themselves. No, that's just basically, it almost seems like, I mean, this is impossible because this was filmed before everyone saw the last episode, but a lot of the complaints I've been seeing, and my own complaint from the last episode was they've rewritten the origins of the Cybermen. Because we already know the canon origins of the Cybermen. In the 50-year span of Doctor Who, the Cybermen's origins, where they first came from, how they went into space, how they keep popping up, it's all been established very, very firmly. And in last week's episode, they seem to change it and rewrite it so that the Cybermen seem to originate on this ship. And the Doctor tries to explain it away in this episode by saying, oh, it's parallel evolution. You know, whenever there's humanity anywhere in the space, once they get to a certain technological level, they will start doing this to themselves. Bollocks! That wouldn't happen. We have seen humanity in Doctor Who for 50 years, and they have never, the people of Earth have never changed themselves into Cybermen. Cybermen come from Mondas. One planet. One planet. That's all that's ever turned themselves into Cybermen. The origins of Cybermen are Mondas. They were created on Mondas. They went out into space, so when Mondas was destroyed, there were still Cybermen ships out there, Cybermen colonies, like Telos, that the Doctor mentions when he's blowing up Cybermen in the forest. He's saying, no, I stopped you at the tombs of Telos. Well, they weren't tombs. It was described in that episode, it was a trap. They put themselves into suspended animation so that they would wait for some race intelligent enough to get into the tomb, to revive them, and then they would turn those people into more Cybermen. That was the Tomb of the Cybermen. That was the story behind the Tomb of the Cybermen. So the Doctor obviously can't remember his own past on that in that point. So, yeah, so parallel evolution, no, that just doesn't make sense. It's just the writers on this one, Moffat on this one, saying, oh, bollocks to all those people who complain that I've screwed up the timeline. I'm going to throw this 1 or 2 lines in, and that'll sort it out. That's fine. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Moffat. That's total bollocks, and you're an idiot. Number 3, why did Missy bother knocking out the Master on the rooftop when the Doctor says, knock yourself out, when the Master says, I can handle the Cybermen, and Missy knocks him out? Why bother? He was only knocked out for a couple of minutes, and nothing really happened, other than the shuttle turns up, and the ladder is dropped, and other than that, nothing happens. The Master wanted the Doctor to stop the Cybermen, so she didn't have to knock him out. He would have done whatever the Doctor wanted to survive. That's what the Master is. He's a survival person. He's all about himself and surviving. If the Doctor said, let me out of this chair, I can't stop them unless you let me out of the chair, he would have let him out of the chair, so she didn't have to knock him out. Number 4, Bill in the barn thinks she's human again. She doesn't want to admit that she's a Cyberman, so she appears on screen as Bill, as we've always seen her, and not as a Cyberman that she's been turned into. Now, I assume this was because, obviously, Paul Mackey is being employed by the BBC to act, so they had to put her in this episode as herself rather than as the Cyberman that she actually is. But the problem with that is, as in a previous Moffat episode, Asylum of the Daleks, where we see Clara, who thinks she is human when she is actually a Dalek. So we see her as a human until the end, when she finally figures out she's a Dalek and she changes into a Dalek. It's basically something that Moffat has done before, but as per usual, he digs into his old bag of tricks that he's repeated over and over again and just drags the same plot point out for this one. Number 5, talking of repeated Moffat plot devices, the end of this episode where Bill is saved by what is basically engine oil. If you remember in the first episode, the pilot, the Doctor describes that liquid as sentient engine oil, for want of a better word. And he is amazed and surprised that it can follow them across the universe and through time. He doesn't understand quite how that happens. So for it to turn up in this ship, with no apparent way of getting into the ship, I mean, okay, in Pilot, we found it turning up on planets. Well, that's fine. It's outside. It's in the open. It's on a planet. It could have got there any number of ways of getting there. But in this episode, they're on a sealed ship. So how this thing gets inside it to be there to save Bill at the end, I'm not entirely sure. Plus, it seems to have picked up godlike powers. It can reconstitute Bill from her Cyberman outfit, even though to become a Cyberman, her body would have been hacked up and bits would have been disposed of as she was upgraded. So for this creature to not only reform Bill, but to pull her out of the suit in the first place, and then say that she's basically the same creature as her now, and she can go out into the universe and do exactly all the things that the pilot can do, was a little bit of a leap. It was basically like the writer writing themselves into a corner and thinking, crap, I've made Bill this Cyberman, but I can't leave her as a Cyberman. I need to give her a decent ending. How do I do it? And Moffat was obviously created this creature, seemingly with omnipotent powers that can do anything that he needs her to do to save Bill. Now, okay, there was supposedly the callback to the first episode where her tears were left on Bill and she knows whenever Bill was crying and all that. But I'm in two minds whether Moffat was thinking in season 1, okay, I'm going to put this small throwaway one line from Bill where Bill says, I don't think those are mine, as in her tears, and then bring it up at the end to save Bill. I'm not entirely convinced that Moffat was thinking that far ahead. I mean, he might have been, but if he did, he still created this godlike being that could do anything he wanted him to do. And for a writer to do that means he's a very bad writer. If he has to create a godlike being that can do whatever he needs that thing to do in any specific moment to save a character or to save an event or whatever that he's written about, that's just bad writing. So, yeah, not impressed with that. But the way Bill actually ends it, in the end, where the pilot says to her, come on, let's go out in the universe together and we can explore. I mean, that would have been fine. Other than the fact that, as I've just mentioned for point 4, Clara, at the end of her time on the Doctor, in the episode Hell Bent, I think it is, she ends up being on a TARDIS with, Azildur? I can't remember the character's name, but basically Maisie Williams' character. Her and Clara go off together in a TARDIS to explore the universe, leaving the Doctor on his TARDIS. So Moffat wrote that episode too. So as I've just said, he just keeps going back and repeating storylines that he's already written. He just grabs bits from stories he's already done and puts them into fresh stories, basically to write himself out of corners that he puts himself in. Point 6. The Doctor's constant almost regeneration throughout this episode. Now, there are a number of reasons why he might be regenerating. In a couple of episodes back, during the Extremis, the monks storyline, those three-parter, we see him start to regenerate when Bill Finch has shot him. Now, as I mentioned back in that review, that was a stupid waste of regeneration energy for him to do that. But I wonder if that was the first signs that this incarnation of the Doctor was dying. But in this episode, he obviously gets shocked by the Cybermen. He gets beaten up by the Masters, both of them. There are a number of reasons why he might be starting to regenerate. So we don't actually know the specific reason for it, but the fact that he kept almost regenerating throughout this episode, and the fact he kept saying, "No, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to regenerate. I want to stay. I want to die. I want this to be an end." Towards the end, I mentioned to my wife, I'm sure everyone has experienced this, so this isn't as bad as perhaps it's going to sound, but have you ever been in a position where you really want to go to the toilet? I mean, like, really want to go to the toilet, but there is nowhere for you to go. So you're like trying to clamp down, you're trying to stop yourself from from doing it. Come on, everyone has been in that position at some point in their life. Don't lie to me, I know you have. And by the end of it, the way he was doing it with the clenched fist and the scrunched up face and the, like forcing it down, it was like, I couldn't help but imagine that. And I was just thinking, he really needs to have a poop, doesn't he, or something? It's like, so I think they could have got away with perhaps just almost regenerating once would have been enough. But yeah, that's a minor niggle. I mean, like, it didn't destroy the episode for me, but like I say, by the end of it, I was thinking about the toilet thing. So, point 7, the Cybermen back on that deck where they were turning all these humans into Cybermen. When they launched Project Exodus, you saw, I think, about 3 different types of Cybermen. You saw the brand new ones, you saw the next stage down, and you saw the Mondasian Cybermen. Why weren't the Cybermen updating older models as they went along? That's basically what Cybermen do. They always update themselves to the absolute best they can be. That's written into their programming. Always upgrade to the best you can be. So they wouldn't have left the Mondasian Cybermen as they were while better versions were being built. They would have upgraded the Mondasian Cybermen as they went along. So all the Cybermen you would have seen in the final battle would have looked the same. Point 8. The Doctor says this deck is a solar farm, and that Nardole can take the humans to another solar farm 5 decks up. Solar farms are basically huge areas of ground with solar panels that suck up the energy of the sun, the solar rays of the sun, and turn it into power. That's a solar farm. Okay? These decks are inside a spaceship. So they're not getting any solar rays coming into them. They're on a spaceship in space. The only sun they're getting is what the ship itself is producing on the ceiling. So how exactly are they solar farms? The ship's producing energy to produce sunlight onto, well, we never see any solar panels. We only ever see farmland. So I honestly don't understand that solar farm. Didn't make any sense to me. Point 9. Nardole blowing up fuel lines to destroy groups of Cybermen. Now, I don't know much about engineering. I'll openly admit that in some regards. So I don't know how these fuel lines work on this spaceship, but if he's blowing up fuel lines, wouldn't that blow up the entire deck? Wouldn't that blow up possibly the entire ship or huge sections of the ship? He's blowing up fuel lines. I mean, just imagine on I don't know, let's say an aircraft carrier, huge aircraft carrier with all that fuel being pumped to different areas of the ship. If somebody decided to blow up one of those pipes of fuel, do you think it would just stop there? It wouldn't, would it? I mean, if you just blow up one section of pipeline to create an explosion that's, say, 50 yards across, that wouldn't stop there. The fuel line would just ignite all the way through and probably take out the entire ship. So I wasn't entirely sure of the logic of that. That didn't. He basically said, well, because I've got great hacking skills and whatever, I can just blow up fuel lines in little pieces here and there and everywhere. Not so much, I wouldn't have thought, Nardole. I'm sorry, mate, but I don't think that really would have worked. Point 10. At the end, the Doctor takes 3 shots from a Mondasian Cyberman. 1 to the back, 2 to the chest. Now, we've just seen Bill use that laser on her head to cut through steel plating to open that hatch for the people, for the kids or whatever to escape through. We've just seen how powerful those lasers are. Now, the Doctor takes 3 shots of them, 1 to the back, 2 to the chest, and not only does it not destroy his clothing, it doesn't burn its way through him. He just stumbles and and Not that Peter Capaldi's acting and his dying scene was bad, it wasn't really, but the fact that he could take 3 shots from a laser that we know can burn through steel plating was just stupid. It didn't even burn his shirt. So either his shirt is stronger than steel plating, either the Doctor's body is stronger than steel plating, and we know that's not true, then that was just ridiculous. The Cyberman wouldn't have been trying to stun him or have his weapon on low power. He wants to kill the guy. So he would have been at full intensity like Bill's laser was when she was cutting through the steel. Point 11, and this one's a little bit screwy because I tried to figure this one out last episode, and this just made it even more confusing. When the Master and Missy are discussing his TARDIS in that room, and she slams him up against that pillar and says, "I remember a while ago a crazy woman throwing me up against a wall hard and telling me to always make sure I've got a spare dematerialization circuit." And then she pulls the dematerialization circuit out of her jacket. She remembers a crazy woman doing that to her. So basically what she's saying is she remembers John Sims's memories as the Master. She remembers that. She remembers herself throwing him against the pillar and telling him about the dematerialization circuit. So if she remembers that, then her previous statement to him when they're out in the woods and he says, "I don't understand how you can't remember any of this happening." And she says, "Oh, well, it's because of the timeline and because we're the same person, we're together in this timeline, it means you won't remember what's happening, and so I won't remember what's happening." Okay, well, that's fine, because that explains, again, a lot of people were complaining about last episode, how can Missy not remember any of this happening as she is the Master? So in this episode, it's like they've put in this explanation of Missy saying to the Master, well, because we're the same person at the same point in time, it means you won't remember what's happening, so I don't remember what's happening because I'm your future self. So they put that in there to explain that for people. But then a few minutes later, they're saying, but she remembers that she was told by herself to always have a spare dematerialization circuit on her, which totally blows the argument out of the water. So does she remember or not? Point 11, and again, another one from last week, which I brought up, which some lady, I think, commented on my review for that episode, which if she's watching this one, thank you very much. I appreciate any comments at all on these reviews. But she mentioned that the lifts would have worked, even though I tried to point out the fact that, well, how could they possibly work with the time difference between the front of the ship and the back of the ship? In this episode, Missy says, well, all we need to do is get on the lift, go up to the bridge and use your TARDIS. And the Doctor's like, well, no, that won't work, because by the time we get to the top of the lift, back on the bridge, thousands of years would have gone by. The Cybermen would have used those thousands of years to upgrade and adapt themselves to stop us from doing that. So we can't use the lifts. We can't go more than 4 or 5 decks up. He makes quite a statement about that. But if that's the case, then how did the Cybermen at the beginning of last week's episode come up in the lift to collect the dead Bill, who was on the bridge, and then take it all the way back down to the hospital? Surely thousands of years would have gone by. So that doesn't make any sense, does it? Again, they're blowing their own arguments out of the water here because they're not paying attention to what they've already said and written. Point 13. The Doctor ends this episode by basically saying to Nardole, okay, you take the humans up 5 decks and I'll blow up the Cybermen that are here. But they both know, as Nardole points out, they both know there are other Cybermen still below them. So yes, the Doctor has taken out the Cybermen on that deck, but he hasn't stopped the threat. So he sent Nardole 5 decks up, oh fine, but the Cybermen are still coming, they're still going to wipe them out, and the Doctor won't be there to stop them next time. So that seems a little bit stupid. That's not the normal Doctor saving the day thing we're used to. Normally when he saves the day, he saves the day. Everyone is fine. In this one, he's just basically just paused the end, their deaths or their upgrades by saying, well, if we move 5 decks up, I'll take care of the problem here, but there's nothing I can do about the rest of it. That's unusual. We don't normally see that. That's not the Doctor that we're used to. He doesn't normally do such half-hearted mercy missions and rescue plans. So I don't know whether that was Moffat trying to say, well, look, the Doctor's not perfect. Sometimes he just has to do the best he can. That might be the case, but as the episode ended, the TARDIS has left the ship and gone to another planet, leaving Nardole and those humans basically to try and stop the Cybermen on their own, which is probably not going to happen. And finally, point 14. The Doctor destroys the entire deck to kill all the Cybermen to stop them following the humans. We see that. It's ruined. It's grey. It's ash. The trees are all gone. All the Cybermen are blown to smithereens. And yet somehow Bill manages to survive. I mean, okay, she's limping, but she's the only survivor in this entire deck. Everything's gone kablooey. Everything's blown to pieces. Every Cyberman, every other Cyberman, even the more advanced and armoured versions than she is, as her Mondasian Cyberman image, they're all dead, but she's survived. Now, I understand she had to, so she could have the tears and the monologue and the crying over the Doctor's body and all of that. But again, it's Moffat writing weak stories. He basically he shows you the devastation that the Doctor has caused. He shows you the black and charred pieces of Cyberman body everywhere. He shows you that the ground is ash for everywhere now. This entire deck is lifeless. And in the next second, you see Bill limping towards the Doctor, looking pretty okay. I mean, she's limping, but other than that, she looks perfectly fine. That doesn't make any sense. It just looks so weird to me as I was watching it. The first time I was like, how the hell did she survive that? So that doesn't make sense. So that's 14 bad points I've just rattled off. That's the worst ones. And there's a couple in there that are niggly little things. But nonetheless, there are 14 points that most of them I saw on my first run through when I watched it live on television on Saturday. The rest I noticed on my second run through and the third time I watched this episode just to make sure I was right in what I was saying and I hadn't misinterpreted things. So this episode wasn't good. It wasn't bad. I mean, as I say, there were huge chunks of it that were great with the Doctor and Missy and the Master and Nardole. They were fantastic. But Moffat screwed it up again by weak storylines, stupid plot points that plot holes that you could drive a Titanic through if you wanted to in some of these cases. So he always manages to shoot himself in the foot. It is really good that he is leaving. We need fresh blood in here. Someone who can come in and bring Doctor Who back to what it was when we had Chris Eccleston and David Tennant and even Matt Smith. Strong, vibrant storylines that aren't stupid, aren't lowbrow, aren't, I don't know, aimed at young teenagers maybe? I don't know, that's how it's starting to look. It's like Moffat just couldn't give a shit about the fans of older ages like myself who have followed the Doctor since they were young kids, way back when John Pertwee, Patrick Troughton, Tom Baker were the Doctor. He's given up on all of that and is basically just, in his last year, he's just tried to reboot the series for a younger generation rather than giving the fans what they have always wanted. Strong, vibrant, solid stories with great characterizations. The only time we saw that is when we saw Peter Capaldi, Michelle Gomez and John Sims on screen together in this episode, and they blew everybody else out of the water. So that's it. That's my review of The Doctor Falls. Obviously, even at the end of this, despite teasing his regeneration all the way through this show, this episode, he hasn't regenerated yet. So I'm assuming we have to see that in the Christmas special when he'll finally turn into whoever the new Doctor is. We'll have to wait and see. So that's it. That's my review for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As I say, I'm not going to apologise for listing all those bad points. They were there, and they shouldn't have been there. So I like the episode. This is a 50-50. I'm going to score this one out of 10. I'm going to give this a 5. I'll give this a 6 out of 10, actually. But purely because of how good John Sims, Michelle Gomez and Peter Capaldi were in this episode. They really lifted this episode. And if they hadn't been in it, in those interactions, this would have been dire. But they were, and they did. So 6 out of 10 for me on this episode. Thank you for watching. You guys take care of yourself, and I'll see you for my next reviews coming in the future. Until then, take care. Bye for now.